This tank's part of the conversion kit I ordered from Muscle Rods, or BRP Hot Rods. I thought that maybe BRP was buying Muscle Rod stuff, but I think they're the same company. But I ordered it from brphotrods.com. They had a whole kit for this car. So I'll get everything unboxed and then we'll go over what comes in the kit. So here's the tank. I don't know if this is a aluminum coating or if it's epoxy coated. I didn't read the fine details. All I knew is it was set up for EFI. It's got 2 holes here in the back with flanges. Not sure if this is set up for a return line or a vapor line if you're running emission systems. Looks like we got a sending unit. I guess we have to adjust it ourselves. It doesn't come with the float pre-installed. Kind of a bummer, but hopefully we can work out what we need to do here. It looks like a fully adjustable sending unit. It's got a slide here on the front so you can raise and lower the pivot point, and then an extremely long float rod. So might have to read the instructions for setting that up because I don't really want to take the tank out a bunch of times, and especially once you fill it up to test it, you want it to work properly. Instructions for the sending unit, which is good. And here we got the fuel pump hanger, fuel pump, strainer, and some more instructions on how to mount that. I'm hoping there's some gaskets for this because so far I haven't seen any. There's the new filler neck, the piece of rubber to connect the filler neck to the tank. Okay, here's my gaskets and screws to mount it. Some more instructions. And here we have a rollover valve. I'm guessing this is for more emission stuff if you're running that. That's everything that came in the kit. I'm going to flip through the instructions, find out how we're supposed to mount this stuff, and once I figure out what we're doing, I'll bring you guys back in and we'll install the sending unit and the fuel pump assembly. So we have to take a few measurements from this opening to the bottom of the tank. That is 6 7/8. It says allow for 1/8 inch for the gasket thickness. So we're going to be at 7 inches from top to bottom. The fuel pump has to have a certain amount of clearance from the bottom of the tank to the bottom of the pump. The sending unit, this pivot point, they want mounted at the halfway point, which means I'm going to have to shorten that a bunch. This deal here I thought was a rollover valve. Is actually the vent valve for the tank. So this fitting here, and there's a nipple on the fuel pump hanger. We're going to tee those together with this guy, and then we're going to have to mount a bracket to the frame rail, or find somewhere on the frame where we can drill a hole and mount this in a vertical position. That's what's going to allow us to stick the fuel filler in the neck. The new fuel fillers probably pump a lot more fuel than the old ones, and this will help vent that, plus any pressure buildup in the tank will be vented out of this as well. So this has to be mounted higher than the top of the tank, actually higher than the top of the filler neck. So this is gonna have to go up pretty high. Just looking underneath it from where I'm sitting, we're probably gonna be up near one of the shock perches. So this isn't optional, we have to do that. So according to the instructions, the length of my supply rod is going to be my depth minus the length of my fuel pump with the strainer on it. And then I'll cut it, mount it up. And then I'm guessing the only clearance I'm going to have is that 1/8 inch for the gasket. So they want approximately, it doesn't say that in here, but approximately 1/8 of an inch from the bottom of the tank to this fuel sock. You also have to orient this this strainer properly, because there's some baffles in the tank, and if you have this clocked wrong, it's going to hit one of the baffles and it'll fold it up and possibly pop it off at the bottom of the pump. So before I click this all the way onto the pump, I'm going to kind of eyeball where it needs to be, because this pump is going to have to be mounted to this, and they want you to rotate the pump to where it rests up against this hose, because you're going to zip tie that whole thing together. Also, that plastic deal that's on the pump that kind of changes the size of the fitting, it says do not remove that. And then this won't fit into that black tube. It says to use a heat gun to heat that up and then stretch it. You don't want to use a lighter on this. For one, we're working around a fuel system, so if you have any fuel around you, that's dangerous. And two, the open flame will blister and burn the plastic before it's hot enough to melt and stretch. I'm going to go about setting this up and getting it installed, and hopefully we don't have any issues. So in the picture, they show wrapping this fuel line round, or the wires rounding around the fuel line. The return line, they want you to be 1 inch above the bottom of the sock, and that needs to be cut at a 45-degree angle. Like so. We're going to put this booty on the pump. And then they came with a couple of zip ties. They sent a couple of zip ties in the kit. Those are some strange zip ties, but we'll zip tie the pump to the return line. I've never seen a zip tie like that. We gonna focus or not? The zip tie, where the zip tie enters the other end, it's nice and flat. The only problem with that is it's probably gonna make it difficult to snip the end off and have it flush. I have some flush cut side cutters, but I don't think I can get that far down in there to keep it out of the way. I mean, I guess it won't matter, it's inside the tank. No one's gonna cut their hand on it. So what am I worrying about? It also makes it quite a bit harder to pull the zip tie. I mean, they look nice. These clamps were all rotated out into where the bolt pattern was, so it wouldn't fit quite down flush. Even this positive light line is that'll work. So I just rotated these clamps to where they were away from the outer edge of the pattern. That should go in there a little bit easier now. And I don't really want to take it out again, so I'm going to put the cork on it this time. Even if I don't put the bolts in right away, at least that'll be placed in there. Get this oriented again. Hopefully I won't have to take this out to get the fittings in here for my fuel lines. But since I don't have the fittings yet, I won't know for sure. So kind of inconvenient, the instructions after they say to mount everything, they said for better sealing, install some of this Permatex 85420 onto the gasket and threads of the bolts for better sealing. If I would have known that, I would have put it on before I stabbed all this stuff. So for some of the classic mechanics out there, I believe this is the equivalent to like the Holymar, which is very difficult to get nowadays, if you can even find it. And that was an old sealer that they used to use in like aircraft, and I think like Rolls-Royce or something designed it. From what I remember, the local engine shop told me that. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of this stuff on the gasket, spread it out nice and thin. I think on the instructions, it tells you to tighten it down hand tight and let it sit for so long and then torque it. I got way too much on there, but it did push some down into the openings of the bolts. So I shouldn't have to apply anything to the bolts. They will get coated as they go through this. There's also O-rings on the bolt, on each one of them little bolts, so that should help prevent leaks as well. Okay, now that I'm all sticky, let's thread this back on there, get ourselves lined up and get our strainer back on here. I suppose if I would have read the instructions better the first time, I wouldn't have had to pull it back out. And I'm not going to tighten these all the way down. I just barely have it snugged, and that way I can get all of these screws started. If I have to shift the module around a little bit, I can. The gasket will still slide underneath there so I can get lined up. And I don't think they gave me a torque spec for these. It's not going to be very high since it's a cork gasket. It's probably so low that you can't actually torque it because the gasket will just keep pushing out. So the pump is installed. Now we got to set up the fuel sender.